it can take me about, an hour and a half to get there. And what I would do is do that with no fluid or food intake, take a little bit of money inside my wetsuit, stop, have a drink, have something to eat at the cafe, and then get back in and go back and do it the other way.
That Triathlon Show 126. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and on today's episode I interview Andy Blow on training for a swimrun. We discuss both training to complete your first swimrun event if you're completely new to it and just want to give it a crack and have some fun with it, and training to be competitive and try to push the front pack, how that differs from training to complete, and how it differs from training for triathlon swimming and running. We also get into things like gear, nutrition and hydration, and racing strategies, and all these sorts of things that are so important when it comes to swimrun. Andy, as you may know, was previously on this podcast in episode 49 when we talked about cramping and hydration and electrolytes, so definitely go and listen to that, and there you can also hear a bit more about his backstory, and you can hear his rapid fire questions. As you probably know, he is the founder of Precision Hydration, and Precision Hydration is also the sponsor of today's episode. They are the provider, this is keeping to the swimrun theme, of hydration for the Ötillö World Series. And that series is like the Grand Prix of swimrun, but it's open for everybody, of course. But that's where the world's best gather and the world's biggest fields gather, from people new to swimrun to the very top swimrunners in the world. Precision Hydration support Ötillö with hydration because it is difficult to get your hydration right in swimrun. It's quite a deceptive environment to be in because you can get cold in the water and you don't really necessarily feel the thirst in the same way. Depends a bit on the air temperature as well. But it's definitely a case where you can't just wing it in hydration. You have to have a plan, and to have Precision Hydration served at the aid stations in those Ötillö races definitely helps you do that much more easily. We'll get into the problems of logistics of carrying things like hydration and nutrition later in this episode. But if you are looking to get some electrolyte products for your training or other racing, if you're not racing Ötillö series where you get it on the aid stations, then go to precisionhydration.com and use the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW, all one word, all caps, and you will get your first box for free. Now let's get into the interview with Andy. One thing that I want to mention is that we did have some audio issues for part of the interview. It's roughly the second quarter, I want to say, where there is kind of some abrasive popping going on, but stick through it because it gets better again towards the end, and it's still listenable, I think, even though it's not ideal, but just bear that in mind. Alright, so on with the interview. Today's guest on That Triathlon Show is another repeat guest. This time we have Andy Blow back, who was first on in episode 49. And Andy, as you know, is the founder of Precision Hydration, but he's also an experienced swim runner. So Andy, welcome back.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be back.
It's great to have you, and today's topic will be swimrun training. So let's just start and get right into it. What do you think does it take to get into swimrun if you're a triathlete but you've never done a swimrun before? Do you need to be one of the front of the pack swimmers to get into it, or what's your take on that?
I think that it's one of those sports where if you pick the right race, you can almost at any level. If you can do a triathlon, you can do a swimrun for sure. The only thing to say about the swimming part of it is in some of the races which have big open water component, or a lot of swimming in relation to the running, it shouldn't be underestimated how good your swimming maybe needs to be, because the swimming is not like a triathlon swim. It's very much more in the wilds. So I think you need a good level of confidence in your swimming, but it doesn't mean it's not accessible to most triathlon swimmers, actually.
And when you mentioned selecting the right race, what kind of race could somebody who is maybe less confident in their swim select if they still want to give it a try?
I think there's more and more races springing up all the time. I know that with the Ötillö World Series races, most of those have a sprint race on the day before or the day after, which are definitely more targeted at getting people, into Swimrun. They call them sprints, but they're still often taking 2-3 hours plus to complete, but they're often a little more sheltered. Maybe the longest swims aren't quite as long, and they're a good example of one of the kind of more accessible events to do.
Obviously, the distances vary from race to race, but just as an example, what would a typical sprint distance race be in terms of swimming and running, and then a typical normal long distance swim run?
Well, I think if you take the one that I did one last year in the Isles of Scilly in Britain, and the longer race took the winners, I think it was either just over 4 or just over 5 hours. I can't remember which it was now. But it's around about 30 kilometers in total, with around 20, low 20, 21, 22 kilometers of running, and around 8 or 9 of swimming in that one. And that was the sort of ratio for the longer race. So I guess kind of two thirds running, 1/3 swimming. And I think the shorter race was similar in proportion, but half the total distance, so maybe more like 15 Ks in total.
Okay.
And I think that's each one does vary because the terrain and the type of the environment is different. And one of the key differences in those events in the Scilly Isles was that they didn't do the long sort of 2K open water swim stretches between the islands. They kept all the swims in coves or along the coastline, so the swims are a lot more sheltered and more accessible.
Yeah. That's a good point about the course, how different it is if you have open water and what kind of running it is. I know in the swim run that I've done, Åland Swimrun, which is the Finnish national championships, it's not even trail running. You're fighting your way through the woods a lot of the time and trying to find your way. So the running is really slow going there, and that makes it like a 9-hour event for the fastest guys. And even though it's only a marathon, not 60 kilometers like the big world championships, which is the Ötillö race in the Stockholm archipelago. But let's talk training. What kind of training goes into swimrun? And first, if you just want to complete your first swimrun, what would you advise that people do in their training?
I think if you just want to complete it, and if it's not your main focus race, if you are a triathlete or a multi-sport athlete, then largely the vast majority of the training you're already doing, because as long as you're swim fit to your level and run fit to be able to cope with the amount of hours and the amount of kilometers that the race is held over, then you've got all the basics in place. I think it's very much so worth looking at some specific practice to maybe try swimming with your shoes on, because that's a big part of swim run, and adapting using things like a pull buoy and potentially paddles in the swim, figuring out how that's going to work and how that's going to affect you. That's important, because I think if you're, for instance, a swimmer who's got a very good leg kick and very reliant on the leg kick, that can hamper you in swim run, because if you're swimming with your shoes on and swimming with a pull buoy, obviously your leg kick is less relevant. And I definitely found that from racing myself and racing alongside other people, the stronger leg kick swimmers tended to struggle a bit. So I think finding out how easy you find it to swim in shoes and with the other accessories on is a good part of the practice. And if you get the opportunity, a big part, because most of these swimrun races are partner events, another thing would be to train alongside the person that you're competing with, so you can start to figure out who's a bit faster on which discipline, whether you're going to tether together or not, all those kind of the details. They're really important, but the fundamental aerobic conditioning and endurance, you can probably rely on your general swim and run fitness for that.
And you did a race, didn't you, where you had never trained with your partner before when you went over to the US, I think. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That was kind of a last minute decision, and there was a really great guy called Nate Lally, who his brother Todd runs a company called Coast Endurance, and they are the swim training people for the Casco Bay USA swim run. And so Todd and Nate were going to race together. They did all this training, and I think just a few weeks before, literally while they were on the course training, Todd kicked a rock and broke his toe, and so Nate didn't have anyone to race with, and Lars, the race director at Swimrun, asked if I would maybe jump in and race with Nate, and that was quite a cool experience, because we met like 2 days before. We did a little swim together, we went for a little jog, and then we raced, and actually it worked brilliantly. We got on really well. Nate he's a very good athlete, but also a very chilled kind of character, and we agreed that we were going to start slowly and move, see if we could move through the field as the race went on. And I was very lucky to race with him, because he was a great partner. He knew the area and that kind of thing. But all of that said, I would definitely recommend, if you get the opportunity to pick a partner that you can train regularly with, that's a big advantage, I think, if you're trying to do your best.
And let's say that you're signed up for a swim run for just an experience and have some fun. How many of those more specific training sessions do you recommend doing, like getting in the open water and actually doing swim run training just a few times to get used to the equipment and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think the first time that I did the Otala in the Stockholm Archipelago, the big race, I probably only did, I would say, maybe 6 proper swim run training sessions. Obviously, we did a lot of swimming and a lot of running, but the logistics of, unless you live somewhere where you've got very easy accessible place to jump in and out of the open water and run alongside it, then it takes quite a lot of setup. And for me, as long as you can do it a handful of times, that's probably good enough.
And let's say you want to move on and you want to compete and actually be competitive in a swimrun event, which you can be if you're a good triathlete already, even if it's your first event. How does the training then start to differ from triathlon training?
I think then what you've probably got to start to look at, I'm sure there are some triathletes who are doing very well at the sharp end of swim run, but I think more and more so the guys and girls at the top are basically doing swim run training. So, if they're riding their bikes at all, then I think that very much takes third place in the training hierarchy. They're probably doing a lot of very specific swim training in the open water with shoes, with their full kit. They're probably doing a lot of trail running, very specific to the nature of the courses, because I think some people are quite shocked when they turn up in somewhere like Stockholm and for the big race in September, and they find that some of the running is almost not running. It's climbing over boulders, it's scrabbling through trees, stuff which if you've not really got your mind and body prepared for that, you'll find it quite tough. So I think if you want to be competitive now in swim run, then the training specificity and on the type of environment that the course offers is very important.
And how much do you think that the top guys and girls train swimming compared to running? What would be the rough distribution between the two?
I think in an ideal world, it depends very much on personal strengths and weaknesses, because if you are obviously a strong swimmer already, but running is the weakness, then you would naturally, if you can, tilt the training in favour of the running in order to bring that up to a similar level. Vice versa, obviously, if you're more of a swimmer, I would say in terms of, if you're fairly equal on swim and run in terms of your ability and fairly equal with your partner, then you'll probably almost spend around about a 50-50 split of time in the week swimming and running. Obviously, you cover a lot more distance when you run for an hour than when you swim for an hour, so your mileage will be higher, but a reasonably equal proportion would be quite good. Especially running is the one way people mostly tend to get injured, so being able to complement it with days when you only swim is a good thing. I've certainly found that for me, running probably would be generally be marginally stronger for me in terms of the two disciplines, but because of injuries, I inevitably end up doing more swimming because it's a safer way to get fit.
Yeah, and so is a swimrun race currently your big goal race? You are racing in Stockholm again this year, aren't you?
Yes, I'm doing. I've been dragged, kind of kicking and screaming. Well, not kicking and screaming, but a friend of mine, Paul Newsom, who is the founder of Swim Smooth. Paul and I used to train together when we were about 19, 20, 21 at the University of Bath, and then we have been out of contact for a lot of years. And Paul got in touch with me last year after we'd seen each other at some events and some swim runs, and he said, we're both 40 around this time. So he's 40 in September this year, I'm 40 in October. And he said, wouldn't it be great if we sign up and do this race together? And I sort of thought, that would be really nice to do that. So he's getting really fit at the moment because he's down in Perth in Australia. He's doing triathlons and he's an excellent swimmer anyway. So my instead of it being like a competitive goal for the year, my competitive goal is to not let Paul down and to keep up with him, basically.
Yeah. But is that your big goal for the year? Or do you have things in between that? Or what I'm getting into is when you get into your serious swim run training mode, what would a typical training week look like for you?
Yeah, so yes, to answer that specifically, it is the biggest thing I'm doing this year going forward. I'm doing the race in the Isles of Scilly as a build-up race, which is in June. But what I'm going to be doing, we'll be 16 weeks or so away from the race at the end of this month. And up until now, my focus has been on just accumulating some swim and run mileage. So I've just been gradually doing a little bit more, building up. So just a very basic level of fitness. And then what I intend to do is I tend to work well these days off a 4-week cycle of training where one of the weeks is a little bit easier. I find that helps me not to burn out and not to get injured quite so much. So I'll be doing 4 blocks of 4 weeks, 3 of which will increase and 1 of which will reduce. And then my main focus, because of the length of the race in Sweden, is actually going to be more tilted towards volume rather than intensity. So I'll be aiming to accumulate more and more running mileage through those weeks, more and more swimming mileage. And although it's not entirely true to say I won't be focused on the intensity, that'll be how fast I can go is a secondary goal to becoming robust enough to survive the 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever the race is going to take.
Yeah, because that is like 9 kilometers of swimming and 60 kilometers of trail running. So it's a strength event and not something that you need to be fast for.
Exactly. I mean, I remember last time when I did it a few years ago, being very surprised at just how broken I was afterwards. And I think that was largely down to the nature of running 60 kilometers on what back then was relatively light run training mileage. I underestimated how much that would take out of me before.
Yeah. So how do you then structure a week in that you do high volume training? How many swims, how many runs, and if you can go into a bit of more detail there.
Sure. Yeah, my training is, when I say high volume, it's high volume for me, and that wouldn't be high volume, I don't think, for a lot of athletes. These days, if I can accumulate 9 or 10 hours training in a week, that's a very solid week, because I've got two little kids, one who's 1 year old, one who's 4. My wife works. I've got busy job running precision hydration. So what I tend to do is almost always I'll aim to train every single day. What inevitably happens is travel or something gets in the way, so I tend to actually end up training 6 days a week, but my goal is to train 7. I'll swim usually 3 mornings in the week, and at the moment they're exclusively in the pool, but in the next few weeks I'll be moving one of those into the open water, and those sessions would be anywhere between 2,500 meters, and the longest I've got up to now is about 3,500 meters, and the idea is eventually I'll push that up to 4,000 or 5,000 meters as the summer goes on. Running up until now has been a case of I live about 2 or 3 miles from my office, and I can extend that run to 4 or 5 miles quite easily. So I'm trying to run in and out of work a couple of times each week, and then I'll be doing a longer run at the weekend, starting off literally with 8 or 9k as my long run, and just building that up until I aim to be doing a few runs of 30 to 40k for a long run in the late summer. And then I will be adding in one sort of speed type running session each week, which will be 800 meter repetitions or kilometer repetitions, and starting to just to nudge the speed forward. And that will be probably 3 out of 4 weeks. I'll do that on one evening in the week.
Will you have trail running as a big part of that running, or is it a lot of it on the pavement?
I'm quite lucky. So where I live, I haven't got access to really rugged, fantastic wild trails, but I do have lots of little coastal trails that I can link together. So I would say at least 50% of most of my runs is on sort of soft underfoot, on rocks, on trails. The rest of it is on roads, just connecting up the little sections of tracks. So when I go and do my long runs on the weekend, I'll go and run in the forest or go and run along the coastal path to make sure that it's predominantly trail running, because for the strength in your ankles and climbing and scrambling over rocks and things, it's very important to keep that practice in.
Okay. I'm going to pause the recording here because we're getting some popping, some abrasive popping here, and then we'll just restart. So just a second. Okay, now it sounds better. So we'll try again. Sorry for that poor audio for a while to the listeners, but I think it's still listenable. So let's. I have one more training related question, and that is. Well, you kind of answer it, but if you just sum up, how is the swim training when you're in swimrun training mode different compared to when you're doing swim training for triathlon? What are the main differences?
I think the main differences for me are I would use hand paddles more in training, because there's a strong possibility that I'd use hand paddles in the race. I wouldn't always use hand paddles in the race, and for instance, if it's very, very rough and windy, and if that would be, chatting to Paul about this, because he's more of the expert in this area. He is definitely of the mind that paddles can be advantageous in smooth, flat conditions, and if you've done the mileage, to be strong enough to use them. But when it gets rough and when there's a high ratio of running to swimming, sometimes they can actually be more of a hindrance. So as a backup, though, I would always do a good proportion of swim training with paddles to make sure that I'm strong enough to use them if I decide to use them when the race comes around. I think they're good for open water swimming strength anyway. And then the other thing would be a little bit more of a focus on specific sessions in the open water with shoes and with a pull buoy and with a Swimrun wetsuit. In terms of the actual session detail in the pool, I would say it's very similar to the type of sessions that I was doing when I was training for Ironman, which would be, I guess in the similar way to how a lot of triathletes would train, with a lot of emphasis on kind of race pace work broken down, 100 meter repetitions, 200s, 400s, short recoveries, and very occasionally some high end speed work just to stay sharp and stay efficient.
And what about the run training? We mentioned running on trails and specific terrain. Is there anything else in terms of the specifics of the workout structure?
Well, again, one thing which is a bit of a strange one to do, but I would actually go for some short runs in the wetsuit, and with the racing shoes and those sorts of things. You probably have to go out early in the morning to avoid the people stopping and staring at you to do that. But just to make sure you're comfortable running in the wetsuit that you've chosen, you can carry the gels or the equipment that you need to take with you, that you're not going to get chafing. In terms of the sort of running sessions, it's a bit like doing I guess any kind of trail ultramarathon training, but definitely not neglecting the fact that the very, very rugged underfoot conditions are what you're going to encounter in most of these races, even if it's only getting into and out of the water. So expecting it to be a smooth run in on a lovely beach and an easy thing to climb out all the time is just unrealistic. So getting out, getting onto the rough stuff to become specifically good at that, is very important.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about gear, because that's something that is used and needs to be used in swimrun. Do you have any, people know probably, or they can go back and listen to my first episodes on swimrun training. They know kind of what gear is used, the paddles, the swimrun suit, having the pool buoy tethered to you, etc. But do you have specific tips on how to select, for example, your paddles and your pool buoy, your swimrun suit, your shoes, and anything that comes to mind that is important for anybody who wants to get into swimrun?
Yeah, definitely. I think equipment is a big topic in swimrun, and it's still evolving because people haven't figured out all the most efficient ways to do things. The starting point for me would always be to look at every piece of equipment and to be sensible about it, but be as minimalist as possible. So what's the least you can carry what's the lightest you can go. And I see people doing some of these races with a camelback, carrying fluids and things and nutrition and whatever else, and their first aid kits in there. But for me, the drag of having to swim with that for, up to 10 kilometers or whatever is probably just not worth it. And so I would go as minimal as possible as a starting point with the equipment. And then kind of going from the ground up, shoes need to be lightweight, quick draining, but with very good grip. So I've mainly tended to gravitate towards the Innovate shoes because they have quite flexible rubber sole and good grip on the rocks, but anything that you feel confident running on multi-terrain on. And if you're not very light on your feet, definitely worth looking at something with toe protection, because it's very easy to kick rocks when you're coming in and out of the water or when you're running on the rocks. And as Todd, the guy who was supposed to be racing with Nate in Casco Bay, found it's very easy to break or bruise a toe if you've not got toe protection. If it's really cold, I have used some very, very thin 0.5 millimeter neoprene socks inside the shoes, which help a little bit with buoyancy, but more importantly, they just keep your feet warm on the really long day out. And the main thing to do if you think you might need to use those is make sure you do plenty of running with those in the right shoes, just to make sure they're not going to cause blisters. Otherwise, regular socks or no socks if you can go with no socks if the temperatures are fine and you don't get blisters. Then kind of going up the legs, I've used neoprene calf guards in most of the races that I've done if I've not worn a full length wetsuit, because I think they really help with the buoyancy of the lower leg, and they also help keep you warm because a lot of these races are in cold water. And then on the going up to your upper leg, you've got most people will opt to use a pull buoy, which I think is very sensible because it keeps your feet and legs higher in the water and keeps your hips up. That there's plenty of good videos online to show you how to put some elastic laces, drill it, put some elastic laces through and attach it to your leg so it can easily be rotated in and out when you're running and when you're swimming. Round the waist, if you're going to tether, you might need a thin belt with a hook on it, a loop on it that you can attach your tether to and your partner's tether to, and that should be very thin and lightweight and sit, fairly close. You can either make something yourself out of a rope with a loop in it, or get something that Velcros on. In terms of the wetsuit, the first swimrun races I did, I used a wetsuit with a zip down the back, like a triathlon wetsuit that was cut up. And that was, I think, was a big disadvantage, because if you can afford to splash out on a proper swim run wetsuit and have one with a zip in the front for the longer runs, it's so good to be able to unzip it. And not only can you get gels or anything you need out of the inside of the suit then, but you can cool down more effectively. So I think as a front zip suit is a really good idea. In terms of on the hands, whether you go for paddles or not is quite an important decision that you need to make quite early on, because if you think you're going to use them, you're going to need to put training mileage in with them. And then I'm currently working with a set of small paddles and a set of medium paddles and trying to figure out whether I've got a strong preference for one or the other. And I think it seems to me at the moment like I would probably use on a very flat, glassy, calm day, I would probably use the larger paddles. On a slightly rougher, windier day, I would use the small paddles, and on a very rough and very windy day, I would go without paddles. So I think it's good to have those kind of options and have that pre-decided before the race. And then going up from there, really, you might want a neoprene hat or neoprene ear warmer if the water's very cold to go under your race swim hat. And obviously a good set of goggles that have lenses that are the appropriate color or the appropriate level of sun protection, depending on whether it's going to be a bright sunny day or whether it's going to be a very dark day when you need something light enhancing. And I think that would be the main rundown of key race kit for me.
Yeah, perfect. I'll just add a couple of things. I used in really cold. I haven't used it in racing, but in training, I did use like some thermal wear under the suit because
Yeah.
it helps a bit with staying warm when it's really cold. And then the second thing is that with the suit itself, it's also compared to just cutting up a triathlon wetsuit. It's so much better to run in a good swim run suit. They made them flexible
Yes.
around the legs and around the quads and hamstrings and hips. So that's another. I think actually that's maybe even more important because in many races the running is still much larger component than the swim. So if you can be comfortable running in the suit, it's going to be a big advantage.
Yeah, I think you're right. When one of the reasons I think my legs were so sore after the original Otolo race I did was I was running in a triathlon wetsuit, and the stress on your hips and hamstrings is very, very significant because you're having to really push your knee through on every running stride. Whereas you're right, the proper suits are so much more flexible. They're good. The other thing I just thought of as well, which is relevant especially to the Otolo races themselves, is then some of these races for ecological reasons are not having cups at the aid stations now, which, to reduce waste, which I think is a really good idea. But what it means is that you need to carry a cup or a small bottle with you to fill up and drink from at the aid stations. And you can get those fantastic kind of silicone bag type drink bottles nowadays that a lot of ultra runners use, and they collapse down to virtually no size at all. And you could carry one of those inside your suit to take it to each of the aid stations, fill it up, and then either drink it there and then or drink on the go while you're running, stuff it back inside your suit before the next swim.
Yeah, so let's move on to the nutrition hydration part. You mentioned not recommending having a Camelback, but you would have that inner pocket or a back pocket on some wetsuit, so you can carry some things, but it varies from wetsuit to wetsuit. But what would you carry, and how would you carry it, and what would you get from aid stations when it comes to nutrition and hydration?
Generally, with the races that I've only raced Otolo races and the Swimrun USA races, which have both got really excellent energy and aid stations on the courses. So I think if you're racing in a race where you can look at it and go, right, there's enough aid stations out there to basically see me through the entire course, I would tend to carry close to no nutrition and hydration with me. The only things I've carried in the races are maybe 3 or 4 energy gels, because I would either want to supplement what I can get on the course for some of the longer stretches, or just as a backup in case I do feel like I'm running out of calories later on. But I have to say, I think out of the 4 or 5 races that I've done, I've probably only taken 1 or 2 of those gels the whole time. I've basically relied on the aid stations, and what that means is allowing yourself a little bit of extra time to make sure you're getting adequate calories and fueling and hydration in at the aid stations, but it removes the need to carry all this extra stuff with you. And it does take some confidence in your ability, and it also, I do understand that, relatively, I've been racing closer to the front than the back of the races, and so moving a bit faster, it's less time between the aid stations. So there might be people who say, well, actually, it's going to take me 2 hours to get from this point to another aid station. There might be a case there where people do want to carry a little bit more to supplement, but in general, I think, in my experience, most of the races are very well catered for. So I'd be aiming to fuel up, at the aid stations predominantly.
And so let's say, how long is your longest race? How long has that been? And how much energy would you then take in per hour? I guess it doesn't matter how long the race is, but how much energy would you aim to take in per hour? And how would you approach your hydration strategy?
Yeah, it's the longest one I did was the one in Stockholm, and which was just over 9 hours. And to be honest, because of the way the energy stations there were based at, I would typically aim for something like 60, 70 grams of carbohydrate an hour, in line with the kind of usual sport nutrition recommendations. And what I found there was that I basically, without being silly, almost ate as much as I could at each aid station that we went through. As I took the view that a little bit more was better than a little bit less, because I was unsure. I know that you can potentially burn through a lot more calories in the cold, and the water there is relatively cold. I feel like I tend to feel the cold worse than some people as well. So I took a view to eat a little bit more rather than a little bit less. And so it would be very hard to kind of give an accurate assessment of what I ate. But generally, I would probably have eaten, say, 3 or 4 items at every aid station, and an item would have been an energy gel or a piece of chopped up cake, or half an energy bar, or a handful of jelly sweets, or a piece of fruit, or something like that. And then I would wash that down with, Precision Hydration provide the drinks for O2Low, which is perfect for me because we have the stronger electrolyte drinks on the course, and I would wash the food down with those, and some water, some plain water as well, especially if you've been swimming in the salt water sea. And again, within reason, I'd be drinking, as much as I felt comfortable to tolerate at those aid stations. So probably somewhere between 2 and 4 cups of fluid at each one, knowing that it's going to be a while till I get to the next one. So I'd rather leave the aid station feeling a little bit full rather than like I wish I'd taken more on.
And what do you think was the average distance in time between aid stations for you?
I'm trying to remember now, but I think it was rare. It was rare that it was more than 1 hour, or significantly more than 1 hour.
Yeah,
I know that on the very long run in the race in Sweden, I did feel like I was running very, very low on fluids. I was getting very, very thirsty, because although the water was cold, the year I did it, the air temperature was quite high. And so definitely what I'll be doing this year is taking one of the 500 milliliter, 16 ounce silicone bottles, and I'll be filling that up at the start of that run, as well as having a drink and taking that with me on the long run, because I think that will be very helpful.
It makes for an interesting challenge when you need to, because the usual recommendations, as you say, 60 to 70 grams of carbs, the recommendations are to take it in more frequently, like every 20 minutes or so. And there you don't have the opportunity to do that with the length of, or at least in some cases, you need to basically fuel for an entire hour in one go and just hope that you can tolerate it. So potentially for people with a sensitive stomachs, they actually need to train things like that and be aware of the course and where the aid stations are and how long they will roughly need to go from aid station to aid station.
Definitely, that's all part of the pre-race prep, is kind of figuring that out in your head. And you're right, I 100% agree in terms of training your body to do that. When I've done some of my long swim run training sessions, one of the things that I did was I live in Bournemouth on the south coast of England, and there's a very nice cafe on the beach, which is around, it's probably in a straight line would be around 10 kilometers from where I live. And to swim run there, swimming in the sea and then running along the beach and swimming in the sea, it can take me about an hour and a half to get there. And what I would do is do that with no fluid or food intake, take a little bit of money inside my wetsuit, stop, have a drink, have something to eat at the cafe, and then get back in and go back and do it the other way. And so you do feel uncomfortably full when you've done that, and it's not very nice running and swimming with that full stomach feeling, but it soon passes. And I think by doing things like that in training, you do adapt to it.
Yeah, sounds like a nice experience, that cafe swim, want to call it that. Just a couple of quick questions. What's your favorite swimrun event that you've done so far?
Ooh. Yeah, I think in terms of, because the pain memories have faded now, it's the big one in Sweden, the O2Low World Championships, is just such an epic event. It's so well organised. It is unbelievable scenery, unbelievably rugged. It tears you to shreds in terms of how much it hurts. It kind of is the ultimate experience, really. And that's not to say the others that I've done. The Scilly Isles is beautiful. Last year when we did it, the weather was, perfect. It was blue skies, calm water. It was like being in the Mediterranean or something. It was amazing. The one in Casco Bay in Maine was, equally good. We had fantastic weather. It's another beautiful place to see. And I think that's one of the great things about the sport is I've not heard of a race in a bad location. And I think they've all got something to offer. I've not been there yet, but I think the one in Hvar in Croatia looks great. That one, I saw the photos a week or so ago from there, and that looked phenomenal. But for me, in terms of the all round package, the big one in Sweden is probably it's the one to aim for.
Would the Croatia one be a bucket list race for you? And do you have any others that are like high up on your bucket list to do in the future?
Well, there's a new one in the US in the San Juan Islands in the Pacific Northwest, which is somewhere I've never been, and I'd love to go there. So that's probably top of the wish list at the moment. I don't think I'll get an opportunity to do it this year because I think it's close to the World Champs in the calendar, and I probably won't be recovered. So that would be really high up. I also, part of me really wants to do the Engadin one in
Switzerland.
In Switzerland, but I have to be honest, I'm a little bit afraid of the cold water there. I think it is really cold.
What's the temperature?
I think it's single digits in Celsius.
Oh wow!
So definitely, and at altitude as well. So you probably have to go and adapt to the thin air a little bit as well. So that I wouldn't say that puts me off, but that makes me think twice about the level of preparation for that.
Yeah. If you want to experience a really challenging one, we had participants that had been to the big race in Stockholm as well, and they said that that didn't necessarily, it almost faded in comparison. The Åland Swimrun, which is in the southwest of Finland where I come from, that's a brilliant one. So if you want a partner one of these years for that race, then just send me a message.
Well, that could be good, yeah. What time of year is that?
It's September, usually mid-September. So the water temperature would be around like 13 degrees. And it's in many ways probably pretty similar to the Stockholm one, but even the running especially is more challenging and more rugged and remote.
I know you're injured at the moment, but do you think you'll do that one this year?
Probably not this year for that reason, and if I'm not injured, then I'll probably do some 70.3 or ITU long distance races, but potentially next year again.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. But let's keep that at the back of our minds, and hopefully maybe do it next year.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be a plan.
Okay, so thanks a lot for the listeners who are wondering. Your rapid fire questions are back in episode 49, so we'll skip those today. But thanks a lot for sharing your experience on swimrun training and racing.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope I know that you're suffering at the moment with your injuries, Michael. So I hope that improves for you. And I guess if it's not improving anything else, it'll be making you able to put out more podcasts, which is good for everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. I hope that you enjoyed that interview. I really enjoyed it as well, and it made me really actually excited to go and do another swim run. I would love to do the Åland swim run that we talked about. I would also love to try out some of the Ötillö races. The Croatia one that we mentioned a little bit looks beautiful, but also the Stockholm, the grand final, or the World Championship is the correct term that I should use. That's something that would be just so epic to take part of, and one day I'm sure I will do that. Anyway, it's a fun sport, and that's my main takeaway. You have to try a swim run, even if you just do the minimal preparation possible, just to try it, complete one, see what it's like. It's so much fun, such a different experience from a triathlon that you just have to give it a go. And I have some reference information on swimrun, some other podcast episodes, 2 of them to be precise. in episodes 57, and that was a solo episode called How to Train for a Swimrun, and episode 63, which is the only race report I've ever done on the podcast, and I did that together with Simon Brierley. We took part in the Åland Swimrun last year, and we won it, and we report on that experience. And of course, I'll also link to Andy's previous episode on here. That one was called Hydration, Sodium and Cramping with Andy Blow, and it was episode 49. For this episode, as usual, you can find the show notes on thattriathlonshow.com. Leave your comments and questions there if you have any. Have you taken part in the swimrun? Are you planning to do so? Which races? Love to hear your thoughts. And if you are interested in giving Swimrun a real crack and want some help with it, I do also provide coaching and training plans for Swimrun. Currently, I coach one guy who has a swimrun as his main goal, and that is in fact the Åland Swimrun. But this is Adam from the UK. So hi, Adam, and you'll notice that I did get your question in today's interview. But if anybody else is interested in training plans or similar, email me, michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and that's Michael with a K. And thank you again to Precision Hydration for sponsoring this episode. And you can find them on precisionhydration.com, where you can take their free online sweat test to find out your electrolyte needs, and then you can use that information to purchase electrolyte products that are tailored to those needs and can be used directly with the race hydration strategy that you'll get from that as a result of that online sweat test. So that's just a fantastic service that it really is unmatched in this space, I think. Again, that's precisionhydration.com, and remember the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps, to get your first box for free. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.